Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. It's March 15th, and on this day in 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings became the first professional baseball team. Sort of. I say sort of because there is a bit of mythos surrounding this particular team. Were they a professional team? Yes. Cincinnati businessman Aaron Chapman was a proponent of having salaried players. He brought in a cricket player named Harry Wright to be player manager, and in essence the general manager, finding players to play for the Red Stockings. He was paid around $10,000 to organize the team and get players and manage, and then an additional $1,200 to play. Now, were they the first professional baseball team? No. There were paid players and even fully paid rosters prior to 1869. They just weren't talked about. The Brooklyn Athletics predated the Red Stockings with paid players by a year or two. The amateur versus professional debate was raging, with a majority of public sentiment on the side of amateur at this point. And that debate would actually go on through the first quarter of the 20th century. The thing that made the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings stand out and become known as the first professional baseball team was that they were fully open about having a roster of fully paid players, and they went all around the country to play. Wright became known as the father of professional baseball. They played 60 games in the season of 1869, and they won all 60. Now, the game looked a little bit different than today, as you can probably imagine. Pitches were delivered underhand at this point, and runs were aplenty. In one game against another team from Cincinnati, the Red Stockings scored 103 runs. They continued their win streak through the first 24 games of the next year. And then, here's the thing. After the 1870 season, the team reverted back to being an amateur team. So the idea that everything leading to Major League Baseball grew out of this team is partly myth. It did inspire other clubs to go full-on professional and be open about it. And is there a through line between what happened on this day in 1869 to today? Yes, but it wasn't the true beginning that so many talk about with this team. For that, we have to look at the National Association. Now, it was a league that was a strong proponent of keeping the amateur element and tried to put the kibosh on paying players. In March of 1871, the professional contingent walked out of the spring meetings being held due to the National Association wanting to remove salaries completely from the game. The professionals stormed out and then decided to start their own league. From that point, the rules and the changes in play would be inspired by the professional movement, heading down the path towards what we know as Major League Baseball now. Also on this day in 1892, another beginning for a Reds team. John Holding was ejected from the Everton Football Club after several weeks of simmering tensions. He was the owner of the soccer ground known as Anfield, with no team to play there. So he decided to create a new team to play at Anfield, and that team would eventually become Liverpool FC in June, with Holding as the club founder, and the germination of that club getting its start on this day 132 years ago. And in 1958, after scoring 12 points and grabbing 15 rebounds in a playoff game against the Detroit Pistons, Cincinnati Royals player Maurice Stokes collapsed on the plane ride home. He had a seizure that left him paralyzed and with permanent brain damage for the remainder of his short life. The seizure was determined to be caused by post-traumatic encephalopathy from an incident 3 nights prior on March 12th. In that final regular season game against the Minneapolis Lakers, he fell to the floor, hitting his head, and he was knocked unconscious. and that was determined to be the beginning of what took place on this night. Stokes had been one of the NBA's best, winning Rookie of the Year in 1955. He was a 3-time All-Star. He led the league in rebounds in his second year, and he was among the league leaders in assists. Boston Celtic great Bob Cousy called Stokes the first great athletic power forward. He was Karl Malone with more finesse. Stokes' teammate Jack Twyman stepped in as his caretaker, helping raise money for his medical expenses and his daily care, and he eventually became his legal guardian. Stokes learned how to type again and was able to communicate a little bit. He became an inspiration to many by keeping his good humor and attitude despite his unfortunate circumstance. Unfortunately, Stokes died in 1970 at the age of 36. And finally, in today's non-sports Did You Know, if you have halitosis or bad breath, eat a slice of cucumber. If you have one handy, that is. That's all for today. More tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.